Maomao was unsure how to feel about that. She swallowed her food and pretended she didn't know what Basin was talking about. "It was your imagination, I'm sure," she said. "Are you having breakfast?" Basin asked. It didn't seem to motivate him to leave, though. Something must have happened, Maomao figured. She set down her chopsticks and looked at him. "What is going on?" His right hand was wrapped in a bandage. Maomao had put it there the night before. He had been so full of adrenaline that even the swelling and the broken bone hadn't seemed to bother him. There was dents and then there was dents. Basin took a breath. He then produced a cloth package from the folds of his robe. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside he revealed another package, this one made of oil paper. She had barely unwrapped the gift when Maomao's nose twitched, and she stepped back. The unpleasant smell came from a ceramic jar inside the packet. "Is that perfume, perhaps?" she asked. She recognized the scent. It was the perfume that had been spilled on Consort Lishu at the banquet. "Where did you get this?" "Funny you should ask," Basin said. His expression was conflicted and he was obviously suppressing a flash of anger. "Lady Arduo brought it to us." "And where did she get it?" "She said one of her bodyguards found it." Late last night, a serving woman of Consort Lishu's half-sister was attacked. She was out walking when a stray dog attacked her, and a guard happened to help her. Just happened to, eh? What were the chances the guard's being there was really coincidence? Even so far from the capital, why would a serving woman be out and about by herself? It was logical to think the guard had been sent to follow her, because Arduo was suspicious. However, there was no need to say that aloud. The dog seemed very excited and completely ignored everyone else around it. It went straight for the serving woman. "Are you saying this perfume caused that?" Maomao pressed a cloth to her nose and picked up the jar. Ceramic ware was not unusual. People did not usually make ceramic perfume jars for stylistic reasons, so tracing the origin of the piece would be difficult. That would mean the perfume Consort Lishu wore last night belonged to her half-sister, correct? And this scent apparently agitates wild animals. "I believe that is almost certainly true," Basin said. "Did the half-sister buy the perfume just as a prank?" Maomao would not have been surprised, but did she hate Lishu enough to want her gone? Even if she had the motive, Maomao doubted she and the serving woman together had the skills to rig the bars of the lion's cage. She considered the possibility that Lishu's father Aryuo had helped them, but that theory also left questions. There was one thing that bothered Maomao. If they were trying to get rid of Lishu, this seemed like a very roundabout way to do it. There were many simpler solutions they could have used. Also, the risk was simply too great. Despite all of this, Maomao wanted to be certain about something. "So you are saying the consort's half-sister is the culprit?" Basin paused. "We can't say for certain, but if nothing changes, I think that's where we would find ourselves." That was an artfully vague way of putting it. It was unusual for Basin. He was normally much more direct. Maomao might have expected him to exclaim, "Yes, she must be punished." Instead he went on. "The half-sister claims it was just supposed to be a prank. She says someone she met in town a few days ago gave her the perfume. They told her it would attract nasty insects, and wouldn't that be funny? Her half-sister swears she didn't expect a lion to be involved, so she admitted her malice toward Lishu. She just hadn't planned on the lion. If that was all true, how did it change things? If she was also involved in booby-trapping the lion's cage, that would go beyond a prank, Maomao said. Many dignitaries were at the banquet in addition to Lishu. She would have put them in danger as well. If she had only been going after the consort, she might still escape consequences. Lishu was a relative, and importantly, she would have some discretion in how hard to push for punishment. The half-sister might not escape punishment completely, but perhaps she will receive only a light one. "You are right. And not only the half-sister, but Sir Aryuo and Consort Lishu herself might also feel the consequences," Basin said. "Do you think a little consequence is all they are going to feel?" Maomao asked. She thought they would be scorched. Many powerful people from another country had been at the banquet. This could become an international incident. She believed it was naive to think that only the culprit would be punished. Basin gave her a sour look. "Why do these things always happen to Consort Lishu?" he said. It was hard to tell if he was asking himself or Maomao, and she wasn't sure what to say. So she stayed silent, but she thought maybe she was just born into it. Maomao hated to wave everything away with words like destiny, but it did seem to her that some people had better luck than others. This realization was particularly strong when she thought of her adoptive father, Liu Men. He was very intelligent and capable, perhaps more so than anyone she knew, but he seemed to have little luck. He was now working at the palace again, but this seemed to invite the fox strategist to visit him frequently, often interrupting his work. The situation must have been quite serious if he mentioned it in his letters. He had written recently that one of his medicine cabinets had been turned inside out. Maomao couldn't imagine why. Isn't it all just too pitiful to bear? Basin said. He is really worried about her, Maomao thought, but she decided not to say anything out loud. Speaking about things best left alone often led to more trouble. Still, it was true the consort had her problems in her own way. Basically, she always let things happen to her. Maomao knew this was almost unavoidable. It was how Li Shu had been raised and how she had always lived. Maomao could not help thinking of the young woman who had come to the pleasure district. She sold herself as a courtesan to cut ties with her father. She also wanted to help her sister eat and to pull herself out of the muck. Maomao could not bring herself to hate a personality like that. If the consort had half that much drive, perhaps she would have suffered less bullying from her half-sister. Perhaps she would not be mocked so much at the rear palace. Anyway, that was enough preliminaries. It was time for Maomao to find out exactly why Basin had come to her. "Is there something you'd like me to do, sir?" she asked. "Yes," Basin said, "there is." He took out a piece of paper. It looked like a wanted poster, but something puzzled Maomao. "What does this mean?" she asked. "That is what I'd like to know." "This is the woman," she said, gave her the perfume. The sketch on the paper did indeed appear to depict a woman, but her face was veiled so that only her eyes were visible. To compensate, the sketch included her entire body. Although the details of her clothes were carefully drawn, she could obviously just change outfits. Is she a merchant? No, apparently she just started talking to the half-sister while she was doing some shopping in town. In town, huh? Maomao listened to Basin's story doubtfully. He said the woman claimed to deal in perfumes. She recommended several different scents to the half-sister. This one was among them. Supposedly, the merchant told her that the perfume could attract men. She was told to be careful how she used it. The half-sister was told the smell would be too strong unless it was properly diluted. Some people had even used it in pranks, in fact. It seemed this is where the half-sister had gotten the idea for her joke. "That story is a little vague," Maomao said. "Very true. It is not much to go on, and tracking down this perfume seller would be difficult at best." Maomao squinted, studying the picture. The outfit, characteristic of the Western capital, was designed to protect against sand and dust. This meant it left very little exposed, concealing any distinguishing bodily features. But Maomao's sharp eyes noticed one thing in particular. For as simple as this drawing is, the accessories on the shoes have an awful lot of detail. Basin took another look at the image. "Now that you mention it, that is true. In fact, the size of the feet seems off compared to the rest of the body. The person's body had been drawn to a more or less normal scale, but her feet appeared twisted, almost stylized. Do you think there is any chance she had bound feet?" Maomao asked. Bound feet. Foot binding was a way of forcibly making the feet smaller than they would naturally be. Some of the women in the rear palace had undergone the procedure. It was a fairly common custom in the north, but what about here in the west? If her half-sister hadn't given it much thought, it suggested foot binding wasn't unusual. "Could you double-check this drawing for me?" Basin said as he collected the picture. "I will," he responded. He was about to leave, then he turned back as if he had just remembered something. "By the way, yes, sir. Master Jinchi has looked odd since last night. Do you happen to know anything about it? He would normally come on an errand like this himself, but instead he chose to send me." Maomao didn't say anything. "Have you heard anything about him? I don't know, being under pressure from anybody." Anything? Maomao averted her gaze. Basin was right. She knew he would not normally come to her unless Jinchi had specifically asked him to. She decided to play dumb. "Who knows?" she said. "Perhaps he is tired. It has been a very long trip." Basin's report came back in less than 30 minutes. The half-sister had clearly been telling her lady-in-waiting that she had nothing to do with this and never meant for this to happen. But Maomao frankly did not care. Basin came back in a huff, quite angry about everything. He told her, "It is just as you said." The woman did have bound feet, and she wore special shoes because of it. This was a detail that was memorable. The half-sister had subconsciously emphasized it when describing the woman to the artist, even if she did not specifically mention the bound feet. "That narrows it down. To just a few people, I would say, sir," Maomao replied. "You think? In Li, the custom of foot binding was found primarily in the north. Here in the west it hardly existed. Thus, if someone with bound feet were encountered in the western capital, it seemed safe to assume they had come from points north. Or at the very least their family had settled here within the last couple of generations. The point is their household must already have had the custom." Basin looked dubious. "You don't think she might have been a traveller?" Maomao shook her head at that idea. "If she had been bound, she would have to be the daughter of a household that could afford to send her in style, like consort Lishu. It was a long way to the western capital. Foot binding twisted the feet into shapes that were, it must be said, not conducive to walking on sandy ground. Foot binding involved forcibly preventing the growth of the feet from a young age. The feet were then bound throughout life so they wouldn't get any bigger. The feet had to be disinfected every few days. This is how Maomao sold alcohol to the courtesans with bound feet, all of which meant that if someone born in the western capital had bound feet, she must have belonged to a family large enough or wealthy enough to continue the tradition. And you're sure about that? I take no responsibility for anything. I have only offered what I think is the most likely possibility, considering the information I have been given. She could not have them expecting perfection from her. If they would only permit correct answers, then Maomao would have no choice but to shut her mouth and swear she did not know anything. "All right," Basin said after a moment, resigned to her conditions. He finally left the room. Maomao yawned and sat on her bed, thinking about getting settled again. Perfection? Not likely. Maomao herself still had several questions. Would Lishu's high-handed half-sister deign to speak to someone she had just met? Would she even buy something from them? How had this mysterious seller known about the half-sister? It seemed a little too neat to be mere coincidence. Maomao decided to go ahead and get some sleep. She was so tired she could barely make her brain work. She lay down, but the hair stick at her chest nudged against her. She considered taking it out, but she did not want to see it. Without a word, Maomao turned over and lay on her other side. She closed her eyes immediately. Chapter 2, The Floating Bride, Part 1. It was already evening when Maomao opened her eyes again. She had planned to go shopping in town today. They said it was acceptable to leave the compound as long as she went with a bodyguard. But after everything that had happened the night before, it was hard to feel like going to market. She slept for as long as she could. When she woke, she felt a lingering tiredness. She looked at her wrinkled clothes with some dismay, wondering if she should have changed into her sleepwear. But first, she drank some water to revive her dried-out body. The water in the carafe was lukewarm, but a dash of citrus made it refreshing. She thought, "I wonder what we are doing for dinner tonight." She decided she should go outside and see what was going on. She tried to brush the wrinkles out of her skirt. She made her appearance reasonably presentable and stepped out of her room. Then she saw Jinchi and Basin coming down the hallway toward her. Some people thought Maomao could be quite brazen, but at that moment she felt distinctly awkward. The night before she had done what she did to Jinchi. Then she excused herself, saying she heard Lahan calling her, but that didn't mean she could hide in her room now. Jinchi's face looked unusually haggard as he approached. He had a furrow in his brow worthy of Gaeshun, and his gaze was fixed on Maomao, it seemed. The look lasted only for an instant before his usual calm expression returned. Basin was looking at Jinchi with distress, so something was up. Jinchi came toward her with footsteps that sounded inordinately loud. "What do I do here?" Maomao wondered, but there was no time to think about it. She could do little more than treat him normally. She bobbed her head in a polite nod and said, "Is something the matter, sir?" Usually, a serving woman would speak only after Jinchi had spoken to her. However, Maomao judged that it might be best for her to talk first at this moment. Jinchi's mouth twisted. A conflicted look passed across his face, though it was hard to say if anyone else noticed. He said, "I know this is sudden, but I want you to change and come with me." Then he swept past her. Several serving women followed behind him, carrying a box with a change of clothes. They bowed their heads deeply. "Yes, sir," Maomao replied. It was the only thing she could say under the circumstances. After she had changed, she was hurried into a carriage. Jinchi and Basin were already inside, both wearing fresh outfits. Maomao looked around. She had spent most of her time here with Lahan. Would it be all right for her to act on her own with Jinchi and Basin? Jinchi said, "I was the one who called you here. Considering our schedules aligned for this very purpose, we could hardly not go." However he might be feeling about her, he at least had the wherewithal to talk normally. She was glad he was adult enough for that, but she could not help feeling something was lurking behind his "It was I, and where are we going, sir?" "To a wedding banquet for a certain household." Another banquet. Well, apparently this was part of the job. I had intended to refuse, but the host insisted, this being such a joyous occasion. "And besides, yes, sir." Jinchi gave Basin a significant look, and he pulled out the wanted poster he'd shown Maomao earlier. "I gather that the family of the young woman to be married originally came from the north. They were one of the houses charged with ruling this area after the destruction of the Yi clan. The Yi clan had governed these lands once, until they were exterminated in the time of the Empress Regnant. That would mean this family had been transplanted here several decades before." Jinchi informed her, "The young lady's feet are bound." As she had suspected, was there no one besides this young lady? That was something Maomao wanted to be particularly sure about. She couldn't accuse people of being criminals on nothing more than an assumption. "Several," Jinchi said. "One of the young woman's ladies in waiting, for example." "The real issue is who the woman is marrying. People say he is from Sheo." "I see. A delegation from Sheo brought the lion. Perhaps they also rigged the cage to break. Most importantly, the young woman is to begin a journey tomorrow. Today they will hold the marriage feast. Then the next day she will travel to her husband's country. That seems rather hasty, or rather deliberate. So apparently they wanted Maomao to find some proof of wrongdoing. And if I am unable to find anything, we will have to come up with another way. My stay here may be extended." The desire to avoid that was written on Jinchi's face. He had already been away from the capital for close to a month, and the work the emperor's younger brother had to do would have been piling up all that time. They still needed to find the culprit. This could also negatively affect the Yu clan, and I would like to avoid that. "I'm not confident I will find anything," Maomao said. She wanted to be clear about that. "I understand," Jinchi said. He turned to gaze out the window and did not look at her again for the rest of the ride. They arrived at another mansion built near an oasis. The style was quite different from that of Empress Jayakayu's family home. This building looked more like something found back east. The building itself and the garden surrounding it would have looked natural in the capital. As they went to the gate and proceeded down a flagstone path, they found water flowing on both sides. Willow trees swayed gently, making the place look refreshing. Open-air pavilions with vermilion posts and yellow roofs dotted the estate. A large pond held floating lotus leaves. The surface of the water rippled occasionally. Each time a pebble fell into a canal, fish splashed. Were they carp? Carp were a hardy species, but Maomao was impressed the household was able to keep them in such a dry environment. Jinchi wondered aloud, was this house left behind by the Yi clan? If these people had been sent to replace a clan that had been destroyed while living in luxury, they might understandably have simply moved into the existing mansion. It was certainly an opulent place, but there was something sad about it as well. Empress Jayakayu's home, Jayakuan's mansion, was lively and bustling. This residence felt subdued. As they crossed the bridge over the lake, they saw someone coming from the other direction, bowing obsequiously. "My apologies for the delay in greeting you," the person said. He was likely the master of the house. He was plump, and his hairline was beginning to recede. A woman stood behind him, and they assumed she was his wife. Her feet were small, and her shoes were strangely shaped. "I am sure my daughter will be overjoyed to receive the congratulations of the Night Prince." The Night Prince, Maomao wondered. She surmised the term referred to Jinchi. Not many people in this land could refer to him by his actual name, but it seemed to involve the character for Moon. Perhaps this was the reason for this nickname. If I may welcome you in, the man continued, ushering them toward the building. A carpet had been laid out in the pavilion. A small boat and lanterns floated on the lake. It was only dusk now, but when darkness fell it would look eerie. Hey, this way, Basin called to Maomao. Jinchi was seated beside the master. Jayukyuan sat next in line, apparently also an invited guest of the wedding. We pushed the matter a little to get you here, Basin explained, regarding the seating arrangement. That is really where Consort Lishu should have been. That is why you are a ways off. I will have a lady in waiting assigned to you. Use her if you need anything. So that was why Maomao's seat appeared to have been prepared in haste. A woman who certainly did look like a lady in waiting appeared from behind Basin as if it were the most natural thing in the world. There were several other women there besides Maomao, but all of them had large, healthy feet.